Welcome, everybody, to another Dispatch Radio Hour. We are happy to have you with us. This is a special one. Before we jump in, we want to take a moment to thank our sponsors at Upslope Brewing. You know, that sound never gets old. It reminds me of a just reward for a day's slaying Eldora powder, or sending a route on Boulder Canyon, or simply floating the Boulder Creek to work. Which happens, folks. Whatever outdoor accomplishment you are celebrating, do it with an Upslope. Okay, so today we are talking with four tremendous athletes who all achieved their own claim to fame in 2017 by setting a new fastest known time, or FKT, on an adventure of their choosing. They're also finalists for the Ultimate Direction Fastest Known Time of the Year Award, and we've got in studio the women's winner. You will hear from Salomon athlete Kat Bradley, who set an FKT running from one end of the Grand Canyon to the other and back, also known as the rim to rim to rim. You'll hear from Darcy Piceu, a giant in the sport of ultra running, who managed to tick off 12 solid hours from the previous women's record of the John Muir Trail. The long ranger, Justin Simoni, who takes adventure and suffering to heights that amaze even Boulderites. And Bryan Williams, now the Colorado Trail's fastest man. Two legends of Boulder join us for the discussion. Buzz Burrell with Ultimate Direction and his partner in all things FKT, Peter Pakwin, the only person to date to notch the double hard rock. Strap in for a fun conversation. If you like what you hear, let us know, and make sure to share it with a friend.
Backcountry Colorado, hiking, backpacking.
I did a lot of marathons. I was convinced to do some ultras.
Climbing, and I do filming and photography.
I just like the ultras because I love the community. I just think that everybody is so nice, whether they're the first place finishers or, you know, us that kind of mosey along.
All right, well, welcome everybody to another Dispatch Radio Hour. We've got a special one for you tonight. The topic is fastest known times. We're also going to throw in a little bit of only known times and some WTFs. First of all, just to start off, Buzz Burrell from Ultimate Direction and Peter Pakwin are two of, I would say, the world-renowned experts. I'm just going to say it, FKT and FKTs here in Boulder, Colorado. We're really glad to have you guys both on the show. Thank you for coming.
Good to be here.
Good to be with you.
And we've got Kelly McConnell on co-host duty today.
Hi, guys. Thanks for
Kelly.
coming. Thanks.
And Kelly, what did you and I do the other day that I'm so stoked about?
We went for
Wait, not that thing, the other thing.
the run.
I was trying to be
What
funny,
did we
but
do?
there's
We
Russ
went
trying
on
to
a
be
run
funny.
where I don't know if we were actually supposed to be there because we broke a lot of trail.
We did some post-holing. We really made Kat Bradley really proud that
was a
day,
lot
I'm
of
going to
fun.
tell you. Absolutely. We're going to have, we're also joined, we're here at Studio Boulder, and we're joined by some tremendous athletes who set some fastest known times this year. So real quick, Kat Bradley, we got a up-and-coming rising star on the running scene, on the ultra running scene, and Darcy Piceu.
Yes.
Darcy was the last to get my email, but she actually is the, well, we'll leave it. We'll leave it for Buzz. We'll get some exciting news about Darcy in a second. We've got Justin Simoni, the long ranger. He is known as a long-distance athlete. He does some crazy wackadoo stuff. We're going to be checking in with him. And Bryan Williams, who just set the fastest known time for the Colorado Trail, which was supported. We're going to get into what that means and all that jazz as well. Before we do that, I want to do a couple of updates, what we've been up to at Dispatch Radio Nation. We've been a little bit in our cave producing some new podcast content for other partners, including the Alpinist podcast. So if you haven't checked out the Alpinist podcast yet, wherever you get your podcast, wherever you're listening to this right now, go check that out. We're going to check in with Nick Mott, who produced a piece for the Alpinist podcast in a little bit. But right now, we want to roll up our sleeves and talk FKTs. Buzz, you've started a revolution here. You've started an FKT of the Year award, which really has given us an excuse to get together in this trailer today.
Right.
Tell me what is an FKT, and just break this down. You and Peter, please, just break down what is an FKT and what are some of just the basics that we need to know if I'm living in Florida and I've never even heard of this stuff.
Fastest known time, I think, are part of human nature. I think they existed. They've always existed. They exist in all sports. They exist no matter what you do. It's human nature to want to go out there and see what you can do. So FKT is just a way of codifying that and putting it in such a pattern that we all can look at it and see what other people are doing. We have the FKT of the Year Awards, which is judged by a panel of voters. 27 people actually voted this year. But I think as everyone would agree, it's really about building community and seeing what everyone else is up to and being inspired by what everyone else is doing.
All right, Peter, break it down. What are just some basic terms or frame of reference that we need to have here as we get into? We're going to hear some terms thrown about like self-supported and unsupported, and I don't know whatever else these folks might be saying. Give us a little bit of 101 here.
Yeah, so in the outdoor adventure world and climbing and running, the element of style has always been important. Not just what you did, but how you did it. And so we've found it convenient to break that down into three general categories. One would be supported, where you have a dedicated support team following you around, giving you stuff that you might need. Another would be unsupported, where basically you carry everything you need from start to finish, except maybe collecting water from natural sources is generally how we define that, unsupported. And then there's self-supported, which is kind of an in-between category, which actually covers a lot of things that people do, which would be something like if I'm hiking the Appalachian Trail and I stop in a store and buy something, I'm using facilities that are available for anyone to use, but I don't have a dedicated team.
Is that what Joe Grant did on his Tour de 14ers?
Sure, yeah, that would be self-supported, like what Justin also did.
And that's Justin's style.
And basically, Justin got on his bike and started riding, and when he needed to resupply, instead of having somebody come, meet him, he walked into a store and bought some food. And
then unsupported, nobody here. That would be like you just carrying everything on your back.
Exactly. So
that is hardcore to the fullest.
So there's a limitation on how long a trip you can do, obviously, because you can't carry enough food for more than, so let's say, 2 weeks. Hunt. Yes, but no. So far, there's been no FKTs
with a bow and arrow out there. What do you think?
Is this taken into consideration for the contest? These different categories?
Yes and no. For example, as Peter noted, it's always classified. And then people might argue to the death whether unsupported is better than supported, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, people really get into it, justifiably so. That's okay. Not yet. And so we make a very clear statement that it is up to each individual. Fastest known time, the website, and the awards do not differentiate. These are separate but equal. Does that make sense? So each individual can decide what this means to them and vote and evaluate it accordingly.
I think there was just a collective lowering of the energy in the room when you said separate but equal. I was like, oh.
Well, it probably depends on the course that they chose.
Well, let's break it down. Let's get into some specifics.
Within each category you're talking about, there can be varying degrees of support. And I think, for example, if you're self-supported, you could have caches, correct?
Yes.
You could put caches around wherever you were going to be running or biking. And then within supported, you could have people carrying all of your gear for you, or not. So there's different degrees of support in all the categories.
To some extent, it also reflects personal style. Some people are just really, really comfortable with having a lot of people around helping them, and in that way you can achieve the fastest time. That's what really we're after. Other people just like to be self-sufficient, and so that's how they want to express themselves, by doing something unsupported or self-supported. Justin's a real, can-do guy. He just wants to get out there and not have to rely on other folks, so that's what he does.
Yeah, and going off what Darcy said, I think that's also, you decide whether you want to go supported and unsupported, and then you look at the previous record and see how supported they were and what they did. So in my FKT, I tried to mimic what Bethany Lewis did, just so it'd be fair. There'd be no reason to argue it.
So what did that look like?
For me, it was, I had pacers the whole time.
sitting in this room?
No, actually, not for the. He was on puppy duty that day, actually, but he was there for my first 2 attempts and he's seen the worst in the canyon and has been at the worst in the canyon all while going for the FKT. But
well, we're going to jump in a little bit more detail. So on that in a minute, Peter and Buzz, break down your nominees. What was interesting in 2017, and just tell us a little bit about who we're sitting with here today.
Well, the question you mentioned is one of the overriding themes, I think. There's been a lot of discussion on which is better, supported or unsupported. And again, people will debate this. And as Kat just mentioned, she did it in the previous Bethany's style. And as Peter mentioned, Justin Simoni does it in the opposite. He's the long ranger. And the voting came out, I think, in a very interesting way. The voters didn't differentiate. They went for what was cool. What was inspired, what was really good, whether it had full support or whether it had almost none.
Okay, so give me some variety. So we've got Justin, we've already kind of noted a couple times because he's, as far as long distance and being self-supported, that's kind of on the crazy spectrum for just amount of work to us. Is he the guy that worked the hardest among everybody, would you say?
I'm pretty sure he
burned the most calories.
Suffered the most
calories. Yeah, suffered the most. Would you say, Justin?
I lost about 15 pounds. Yeah, so.
That's okay.
Well, Justin gained enough vert to make it into outer space.
So what he did was he biked to every one of the tallest 100 mountains in Colorado and climbed said mountain. And it took, how long did it take you, Justin?
About 60 days and 12 hours, 14 hours.
So you were exercising for 60 days straight. I mean, that's just absolutely insane. Okay, so we've got that. And then we also have on the other spectrum, the kind of shorter but very competitive, like the rim to rim to rim, Cat Bradley.
Yes.
Right? So would that be kind of a fair kind of spectrum to lay out for folks?
That's a very good spectrum.
Okay, gotcha. And the winner in the female category, Peter, was?
Darcy.
Now, I want to hear from a judging perspective. What did she do, and why did you think it was impressive?
She ran the John Muir Trail, which is one of the premier FKT routes in the whole country, and one of the premier trails in the country. Is 220 miles through the Sierras, doesn't cross a road of any kind in that distance. And she did that supported. She had a full support team, and she just demolished a record that had stood for, I think, 10 years by the great Sue Johnston, beating her time by 12 hours.
Wow. And so what sticks out there is the amount of time she took off of that, and the fact that the John Muir Trail, there's so many people that attempt this thing that you truly stand out as an athlete. Is that right?
Exactly.
All right. And then Bryan Williams, we've got the Colorado Trail. Again, many people have attempted. Similar style as Darcy, is this right?
Yeah, fully supported.
Fully supported. Mm-hmm. And took off, how much time off of that? How much time did you take off?
7 hours.
7 hours.
6.5 hours.
So less of a chunk off of that, but an equally competitive FKT or not so much?
It's definitely up there, yeah,
it's up there
for sure.
On the competitive landscape. Okay, cool. So we've covered kind of self-supported, supported, etc. Justin out here on the crazy spectrum, and then Kat and Darcy and Bryan mixing it up with the more competitive FKT attempts. Other notable themes or questions or controversies that might be coming up.
Well, I think you just laid it out there with the people in this trailer. I mean, Darcy and Kat had full support. They just blazed it. They went super fast. Everyone said, "Wow, that's terrific." And then, Justin still made it onto the list for being out there for 60 days.
Well, okay, we'll get you on the list. If you're going to spend 60, we'll put you on the list.
And the number one for the men, the voters acknowledged as number one, was String Bean, Joe McConnell, who did the Appalachian Trail self-supported faster than any of the supported famous ultra runners had done it.
That really is truly amazing. What do you guys think about that?
I've hiked the AT. I did it.
Cat Bradley.
I did it in 2011. It took me 115 days, and I thought I was trucking, and I do still think I was trucking. I wasn't eating.
And you definitely stunk too.
Oh, I promise you I did.
Kat, wait, before we go any further, can you please paint a picture of what's on your lap right now? Other than the cutest puppy in the world.
Oh, but it is. I mean, I think you just said it. This is Shirley. So actually, Shirley was named after my dog, Maybe, who hiked about high 80% of the Appalachian Trail with me. And I got her when I was a teenager, 17, 18. And she hiked almost the entire Appalachian Trail with me. And I named her Maybe She Will, Maybe She Won't, because she was an awful rescue red heeler. She was mean as hell. And so Ryan and she died a couple years ago, and it was really hard on me. And it took 2 years to kind of heal from that. And then Ryan and I, right before the Grand Canyon FKT, like after my second attempt of the FKT, I think the first thing we did was get a puppy, like the next day. And we named her Shirley.
And you got Shirley, maybe.
Yeah,
All
Shirley,
right.
because
Lovely.
surely she'll be good.
Awesome. Are we ready? Are we ready to dive into these guys? I'm gonna do a little segue. We're gonna do a little segue.
Last 30 miles to the tower. It wasn't raining, it was just flashing, heat lightning going off, and it looked like Frankenstein's palace or Dracula's castle or something. And the closer we got to it, the bigger it looked, and it was like, show no fear. Show no fear, because Johnny was shaking in his boots, and I was shaking in my boots in the back of that white Chevelle convertible. That was a huge adventure for a little boy. Let me tell you. I hitchhiked out from where I was going to college in Tennessee, and I'd never been west of the Mississippi. I'm a child of the suburbs. You know, all we had to climb was trees.
That was 72, you said?
That was 72, June.
June
As a matter of fact, that's another reason June's a sacred month to me.
Frank says the tower fueled his sobriety 18 years ago when he bought his lodge on park property. The next day, Frank took me climbing at the Needles, about 2 hours from the tower.
There's one called Bolts for Bob. It's just a fun climb. We're in the Needles of South Dakota, and all around us are pine trees and veritably a Joshua tree with trees instead of desert.
My climbing partner Alex and I scrambled among the maze of coarse gray granite spires with several of his employees, friends, and guests at the lodge.
There's 5,000 climbs in the guidebook. I feel like a kid in a candy shop. I want to do them all now. But you gotta do them all one at a time, you know. Got me on, big man?
I do, sir.
Am I on belay?
Belay's on.
Well, pull!
All right. Well, Nick Mott, that was Nick. You guys hear on that audio. Nick, we're happy to have you in the studio, Boulder.
Thanks so much for having me.
Tell us you live here in Boulder.
I do indeed.
Welcome to the show. Tell us a little bit what you do.
So I do all kinds of journalism, but especially on the radio. So I work on I'm assistant producer on a show called Threshold. I was actually just up in the Canadian Arctic reporting for that. I have a show for REI coming out in about a week called Take It From Me, so keep an eye out for that. And I did this piece for Alpinist. Yeah.
And who are we hearing in that?
We're hearing Frank Sanders. He's a guide at Devil's Tower Lodge and sort of an outspoken voice about climbing at the tower.
So tell me a little backstory about reporting this story.
Sure. So when I first started, so I had done a print piece for Alpinist before this, and actually hadn't spoken to Frank for it. Whenever you hear about the tower, you often hear about Frank. And so for this audio piece, I really wanted to get in touch with him. And I called the lodge and left a message for him, and he called me back, a day or two later, and he sort of laid it out for me. He had no interest in talking to me whatsoever. He'd been burned, I think, by a Wyoming public radio piece that had come out. He didn't quite like how they had portrayed him. But I just kept listening to him. We ended up being on the phone for like a half hour as he told me about the tower and, some of the impact it has on people that come by. And, by the end of the conversation, he was like, you know what? Just come on by. You can stay in my yard.
Well done, Nick. Well, we look forward to doing more stuff with you and having you back on the show. Thanks for producing a great piece. We've been super thrilled by it. And, you could tell by the way this man holds a mic, right? This is a radio pro. Look at me. I'm just flopping all over the place. Thanks for coming by, Nick. Thank you. All right. Now we are going to switch to the main course here. We're going to dive in a little bit and talk to some of our FKT Award nominees. Kelly, will you do the honors?
Yeah, Kat, could you just tell us a little bit about why you chose the course that you chose?
Yeah, so I I first ran rim to rim in 2013 or 14, but I was living in Santa Barbara, or I was back and forth between Santa Barbara and Winter Park, Colorado, and I made this like awesome, crazy friend group with Luis Escobar, a friend that I went to college with, and just all of these like crazy people that were running these crazy distances, and I didn't know what to think of it. And they convinced me to do the whole rim with them, and took us 16 hours, and the whole time Luis was, telling me, slow down, kid, and I was like, no. And, I was 22, and it was, right out of college, and he was just like, you're gonna blow up, and out of stubbornness, like I didn't, and in the last in the last climb, I went ahead and met them at the top, and I told Luis was like, there's such thing as an FKT, and explained to me what an FKT was, and I was, stupidly, I was like, I'm gonna break it. And so that's kind of where it all stemmed, the FKT for me in my, in the canyon, and, it was this project that I always had in the back of my mind, and it was kind of always what I was thinking about and training for. And I signed up for races because they were fun, but for a long time I was also like raft guiding and ski guiding in Winter Park, so I didn't have time to run. But the FKT is kind of what kept me running, so that's why I chose, it's very organic to choose
Kelly,
that.
we should mention that Kat had another pretty amazing accomplishment last year.
Yeah, can you tell us about that? Because I was going to bring that up. So
Minor footnote.
She won the Western States.
I was going to say I won a beer mile recently. That actually was back in 2014 when I drank a lot more beer. But, yeah, I did win Western States this year. Thank you. Oh, that's really nice. There's been a lot of accomplishments since then by a lot of other people. So
another beer
she's
mile
really
coming.
Russ said earlier that she's up and coming. She's here.
Yeah, she's arrived. She firmly put her flag in the ground, I'd say.
I'm sweating right now. Yeah, I mean.
Well, it's because it's the trailer. It's. I
You're
told
right.
you,
You're right. It is hot.
It gets hot in here.
Yeah, I mean, while training, I was supposed to go for the rim to rim right before Western States. I got in Western States. I was like, really, I'm so glad I ran it, and it was so special to me. And I didn't understand it before I ran it, but I didn't want to run it when I got picked, and I'm so glad I did. But I was training for the FKT, and I couldn't. That's what was the goal, and Western States was an afterthought. So I'm sure glad I had that goal.
Why is that? What is it? Why?
I don't know.
What is it about the FKT that was kind of got you more motivated to train than one of the biggest races in the country?
Well, I think that's what I said I was going to do. So that's what I wanted to do. But honestly, if I'm looking back and was really honest with my approach to Western, I was just deflecting. I was scared out of my mind, going into Western. How can you not be? And I knew I had potential, and that's even scarier, So I think all that mentality right before Western, it was genuine, but at the same time I was deflecting some pressure, subconsciously.
So did you see the Joe Grant email? So, guys, Joe Grant helped reframe my approach to this episode, because we do tend to get real focused on the time, the time, and look how fast you're going. And Darcy, oh my God, we do need to talk about time, just because what? It's insane. But Joe sent us a really nice note. I said, hey, what questions should we ask these guys? These guys, and he said, his experience with the Tour de 14ers was that he had his connection to the place change, that through the course of his journey he really felt this new kind of deeper connection to place. And I'm wondering, from each of you, getting beyond the time, did you sense some, did you sense any of that? Did you feel any did your experience with where you were running, did that end up being kind of a really big part of this? Maybe starting with Kat.
Absolutely. I would say that first run in the Grand Canyon is still, to date, the best run that I've ever had, not in turn, it took 16 hours, but it was, so exactly, like, time doesn't matter, but I felt great the whole time. I was, ignorance is bliss. Sometimes when you don't know what you're getting into, it's not as hard as when you know what you're getting into. But, it was amazing. And then as I went back with a new goal, and again, I feel like I grew with the canyon each time. And like, I really, I tether in those, because it's really formative years. I'm 26 now. When I started this project, I was 22. And those are pretty formative years. So I feel like the growth I had as a person and like career change, I went from being a bum, living in a car, to a teacher, to running. Back to being a bum. Yeah, back to being a bum. You're so right. Just a glorified bum now. But I feel like that growth as a person, like the Grand Canyon and the place and the project, really tied into me and like who I identify as.
And Justin, in that same exchange with Joe, you mentioned in your blog post that I read, because I do research, that Joe was one of the inspirations, as you put it, to get off your ass. Is that right?
Oh, sure. Like, I think in 2015, I sustained a pretty bad injury on my ankle, sprained it, and couldn't run, barely walk, couldn't really climb. And seeing Joe out there and Rob as well in 2016 is what I kind of went, I should probably get off my ass and get this fixed and get out there.
Robert Plant from Led Zeppelin?
A gentleman called Rob Barlow. So in 2016, Rob Barlow, he's 31, I think. He's like, I'm going to do the Centennials on a bike. And he did. And it was like the first time he's ever done that type of project. So I thought that was pretty ballsy, to be quite honest. Joe's done some self-supportive bikepacking races, but he also kind of just came out of the gate, just, scorching these courses as well. So I was just like, wow. Like,
and just so listeners that may not know, Joe did the Tour de 14ers, which was biking to each of the 53 14ers. Correct. And you upped the ante and said, screw that, that's not enough. I want more mountains. Give me 100.
Well, I think what's nice about the FKT community is that we inspire each other. So I actually did the 14ers tour in 2014. And the last time I could find someone doing a similar tour was back in 1997. And I was like, wow, why isn't this something that people do every year?
Buzz and Peter, you want to take that one?
Well, I think Justin could probably answer that better than the rest of us. You have to have a very flexible employment situation. You have to.
Now Peter's calling me
employment. Yeah, no employment.
You have to be really, really comfortable being by yourself for however many days that was. It took you 34 days, and and you have to have good luck and be good at a variety of things like. Cycling and climbing and hiking.
And you also have to be a little nuts.
That too.
I think if you're not a little nuts, you'll become a little nuts. Yeah. It's fine.
Did any of that the connection piece, does that resonate with you?
So I actually don't own a car. So the way I approach the mountains in general is by bike. So it's my frame of reference generally. So I think have a unique perspective on doing these mountains. Almost every time I do a mountain, I camp beforehand, and it's like half a day to get to them. It's not just a 2-hour drive on a car on I-70. So yeah, I mean, I'm sleeping in the ground. I'm very attached to the land for sure. There's not a lot of insulation during the tour.
I'm curious. Kat mentioned personal growth. So what is the personal growth for you within what you do?
So when I did the tour 14ers, it took a month plus, right? And at the end I was destroyed. I did go pretty crazy. I just went kind of insane. Body was ruined, So when I was like, I should do the Centennials because it'll take twice as long. So think of like doing the 14ers tour, feeling destroyed, being out of your mind to be like, well, let's do it again. So it was almost like, is that possible? I have no idea. And I think that was one of the things that attracted to me to it. It seemed a little more futuristic. For example, the first two brothers who did the 14er tour did it around 1986 in around 90 days. And that at the time was futuristic. So I was like, what's sort of like, how do I make this my own? How do I make it futuristic? So I'm like, yeah, we'll just do twice as many mountains, no problem.
And Darcy, give us the basics. John Muir Trail, we're largely Colorado audience, so maybe we don't know how long this thing is.
Right. The John Muir Trail is 222 miles total. So, well, from the Whitney Portal, I ran it from the Whitney Portal to Yosemite Valley.
Have you done it before?
No, I'd never done it before. 2 years prior to 2017, I had gone out there and started a solo unsupported attempt and got about 70 miles in and was just... I think mentally wasn't really prepared for that and being out there for that long. No contact with my family or my daughter. So that just kind of took over for me. And I bailed out at 70-ish miles. I can't remember exactly the point, but I saw enough on the trail at that point that I knew I wanted to go back and explore more. So it was just aesthetically, it's one of the most... As Peter was saying, it's one of the most beautiful trails out there, and it's 200. I mean, to find that length of trail that you never cross a road once.
Is that why you chose it?
I don't. I'm always looking for what's next, and what's. A lot of it has to do with the beauty of the trail and the aesthetics of the trail, and I'm always kind of seeking the next adventure. And I've been in the sport for 18 years now, and so that's what draws me in. Yes, yeah.
Does what Joe said resonate with you? Do you feel like your connection to that did you feel some moment on the trail where like, oh, this is part of me? Or
yeah, I had a lot of those moments, and I videoed some of them. I haven't shared any of those, but videotaped myself just in those moments of like utter tears coming down my face, just watching the sun rise and set. What is that, like 4 times? Is just, you do feel connected to that area. And there was a part of me that didn't want to leave. I didn't want to come back to like the real world. And that is really why what kind of started. I was an Outward Bound instructor way back in the day, and just being out in nature and being in the mountains.
Did you cross paths with Luis Benitez?
Oh, I know Luis Benitez. Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
You know what he's doing now, right?
Yeah,
okay.
he's a.
We're releasing his episode tomorrow. So
oh, nice.
If you guys are interested in Luis,
yes,
check out Dispatch Radio. Got an awesome interview.
He's done a lot in mountaineering and with Outward Bound and all of that. Yeah. So yes, absolutely. There's connection to the place, and that's what it's all about. Is feeling that and appreciating that. And on the John Muir Trail, you're running into a lot of people that are hiking the PCT and through hikers. And I really I took my time and talked with people and wanted to hear about their stories and listen to, where people had been.
Buzz, hold on.
I took my time.
Hold on.
Well,
Darcy just told me she took her time smashing this FKT on the John Muir Trail. Does that make any sense at all?
Ultra runners have something called short-term memory syndrome. It's a well-known affliction. So there's a reason she hasn't released these videos yet, because you're going to see the other side of the story. But of course, months afterwards, yeah, fun, no problem.
I was chatting with people the whole time. It was all good.
Well, on the passes, there's a lot of passes, and I wanted to hear what people were doing out there, and some people were through hiking the entire PCT, and some people were piecemealing just the John Muir Trail over 5 years, and they were just finishing their last section of the John Muir Trail, and I love hearing those kinds of stories, and that everybody has their story, and that's just beautiful.
Did you tell them what you were doing? And what did they say?
I typically no. I didn't. I had a couple people, there was maybe 1 or 2 people that were like, are you in a race? And I was like, no.
Against time.
Yeah. and honestly out there, I mean, I know I really did feel like there was a lot of blissful moments, and when I would come to my support team and my crew, they were kind of like, do you know what you're, do you know what's happening? Like, do you know what's going on? Do you know how quickly you're doing this? And I had a sense of it, but I cared less about my time and more about the experience and the people that I was sharing it with.
We're going to get back to this time thing in a second. I do want to get to Bryan and talk a little bit about the Colorado Trail. This is a trail that is very familiar to a lot of our listeners. Folks get out and do a portion of it. Folks take a summer off and try to do the whole thing. Bryan, what got you interested in the Colorado Trail? Had you done it before?
Sure. I think got to give props to Scott Jaime because he set the FKT in 2014. I think that kind of just planted that seed. Over the last few years, though, a friend of mine, Eric Truhe, we started running segments of the Colorado Trail. This was kind of his vision, his goal, and I just was kind of tagging along. He just invited me, and it was actually last summer we set an FKT circumnavigating the collegiate peaks together. And over the last few years, we just started piecing it together. His dad would crew us. And earlier this spring, it was kind of like, do you think we should go for this? And over the last couple years, I mean, that was always the discussion. Hey, do you think we could do this? And we would go out for a 3-day weekend or a 2-day weekend and just be completely wrecked at the end. And honestly, I mean, I think his dad would share with us, man, at the beginning of these weekends, you guys are so excited and fresh, and then just hearing like we can barely walk and we're so ready to get home, and it's it's tough. It's an emotional roller coaster out there.
And yet you dropped Eric for the FKT attempt because you were self-supported, right?
We were both supported.
I'm sorry. You were supported.
We were supported.
And you were with Eric.
We were with Eric. We decided that we would go for this as a team, 2 runners. And, unfortunately...
What happened to Eric?
I think he said shin splints, but honestly, I mean, just injury, it's a lot of miles. He dropped on the 4th day. So, I mean, putting in basically half the trail. So I give him props for even making it that far for sure.
To go from like running with your buddy to being alone, that must be quite a shift. You're like,
for sure.
Now I got to talk to myself for 4 days.
Yeah.
Did you do the Darcy approach and stop and talk to everybody that you saw?
That's funny. I mean, everything that each person has shared here really did resonate. I mean, I feel like there's a common thread here, not just the craziness. But yeah, that first day, my idea was I think it'd be really cool to make a movie about this. Matt Trapp recorded a movie of Scott Jaime, and that's what I remember and thinking how cool this is. And so just running with an iPhone, and we were stopping and talking to thru hikers, and it's so cool to hear their story. Most thru hikers start Denver and go southbound to Durango, but we started in Durango. So we're meeting people that had been out there for a month already, and by the look of them, you could tell. But just fascinating stories.
Is it like looking into your future when you do that? You're like, oh, I'm going to look like this in a few days.
Well, I'm not carrying a big, heavy pack, though. I mean, we're moving so much lighter and faster, and... it was cool. Hey, I just want to hear about your trip. How long have you been out here? And I'm recording them, and Eric's kind of like, maybe we could just interview every 5th person, because we are going for an FKT. But I just thought it was like fascinating. I thought it was a good game plan to like make us slow down in the beginning too. Because you definitely don't want to like go out too fast, and that's maybe more like race strategy. This isn't necessarily a race.
I have a feeling Cat Bradley was going out fast.
A little bit.
I really want to know. You all sound so passionate, and I feel like
don't you love
that is what gets you through these things. It just sounds that way. But tell us, each of you, starting with you, Bryan, when you get to a place where it's so hard, what pushes you? Where do you go when you dig deep?
a way I'd like to answer that is by something Darcy said was just about like the sunrise, and there's just times out there that you just have to be so grateful that you've actually chosen to put yourself in that place. There's no help. You aren't going to see people for hours, and maybe you might be in a very dark place at that time. But man, not just on the CT, but on my morning training runs or whatever it might be, man, knowing that you can see a sunrise and that you've taken the time out of your day to start your day like that, checked out from everything else. There's no emails, there's no phone calls. I think those are the things that you start to become passionate about and like really value your time, kind of that solitude. There's a flip to that though, and maybe we want that time to ourselves, and then flip that, and there's that time of like just pure loneliness, and just like you just need that love and support of someone else out there. And I think that's the thing I realized for myself out there of, man, having a lot of respect for guys that can do this unsupported or self-supported, and knowing I was fully supported out there. Maybe that would be the next challenge. Could I do this and go for it again? Maybe, but really relying on just knowing that someone is going to be out there, and you've got more water, there's more food. It gets tough out there. I mean, no doubt about it. You want to quit. You don't know how you're possibly going to go on. I think there's just this burden of you can't think about, I've got 300 more miles to go. Like, it just crushes your soul.
Yeah, and you said, you're like, I chose to do this. I'm supported. There's people who do these things unsupported, and then you take in the energy of all the
I think
environment.
the thing that kept me going is realizing, like, they are equally committed to me in this project as I am to them. Like, they have taken off time of work. They've supported me through training. They've done recon on the course. We've invested years into this, and they're waiting on a pass with down coach shivering, just waiting for this crazy runner to come through to give him some more food. And I think that's the thing that keeps you going, is like
the community you built around it.
But like, they have given this to me. That's the least I can do, is make sure I keep going and give this back to them. Because for me, it was a team effort for sure. It was not a solo thing. So.
That's awesome. But Justin's wasn't a team effort.
Justin, how about you?
So that's the question. I don't know how you keep going. That's tough.
First off, I think that was a wonderful answer. That was really, I felt that in the heart.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah, I didn't have that. No one was waiting for me anywhere. Which
more burly.
That's not quite true. My family was worried about me, and I did have text messaging in some parts of the trail. But just like he said, you signed up for it, right? It's like, and you have to realize that the crux is your mind, right? The mind will hold you back, so you have to work with that, right? I can go as fast or slow as I want. I don't have a time I need to beat. I only have the time I kind of set for myself. So I just said, let's go. I think the lowest point for me in my whole trip was in Silverton, Colorado, just a couple weeks in, but the weather last year was atrocious. It just rained constantly, and I was looking at a 6-day backpack in the Wenatchee, and some of the most technical peaks. And if it's raining, I won't be able to climb them. And I won't be able to get back to that area because, it's like 2-hour bike ride to get in, 30-mile hike to get to the mountain. I'm just not going to do that twice. Like, I just don't have the time. So I was like, man, the weather's horrible, but I'm in Silverton. It's actually the farthest away from my house from the start that I could get. So like, might as well keep going. Like, I would like ride my bike. I was like, just imagining riding my bike back after, calling it and be like, I feel better now. Why don't I just keep going? So, I was like, if I can do this Wenatchee trip, this 6-day trip, and it works out, there's nothing that could hold me back. Like, the weather can't get worse. Like it just won't get harder. It's like I could prove to myself that anything in the future can be done.
How close did you get to dying?
How close did I get to dying? I don't.
Did you feel like you were gonna die?
So there's lots of dangers. One of them is the technical peaks.
Well, okay, yeah.
So
break down the dangers. Technical peaks.
So
okay.
the technical,
Did you have
the
any
technical
close calls
climbing.
on a technical peak?
No, that was the funnest part, right? I never climbed anything technical that I felt was in bad condition or out of condition. So that was
wet with rain. No big deal.
kind of loose. But that was most of the joyous parts was just the technical climbing, because you're like, I've got this. This is something I could train for, right?
That's one. So technical climbing, another danger.
Being so out there alone, so 3 days not seeing anybody, kind of thing.
Like mental thing or what?
Let's say I trip and fall and break a leg.
Right.
Right. And also,
no one would know.
Yeah,
You're
and
just
I'm Aaron Ralstoning it. I didn't. I really didn't want to do that.
Where is that guy? Why haven't we heard from Aaron in a while?
He runs in
Is he
Boulder.
alive?
I see him all the time.
We gotta get Aaron on the show.
So I did have like a spot messenger, but unfortunately, I've been using the same spot messenger since 2011, and it wasn't working.
No.
So it pinged me once every 2 days. So no one would know where I was until.
All right, nobody. So danger.
And the biggest danger actually was when I was riding a bike, just traffic. Yeah. Right. That was what I was scared about. And I could mitigate that by taking off-road back roads and trying not to be on a paved highway at night, basically.
The irony of the most dangerous part of Justin's trip being on a road with cars.
And it just so happened a year ago, so 7 months before I started my trip, I got hit by a car pretty badly. I got T-boned by a Jeep. So that was in the back of my mind, like, if this can happen, I can get hurt. So it was amazing that I was able to do the trip at all, kind of thing.
Cool.
But yeah, okay, so who's been on Independence Pass? You see,
Aye.
it's very famous to
hands all
cycle
around.
over. I was on the Aspen side coming over to the Twin Lake side at 8:30 at night, and it gets to like, it's like, what, 5 feet across? I have no idea. But I was scared out of my mind. I was like, this is how I'm going to die. There's going to be a camper coming towards me and a car coming my direction, and I'm going to get squished. So that was one of the places where I called it. I'm like, I'm in my 30s now. So,
Darcy, how about you? Where do you go when you dig deep?
Well, at this point, I call them pity parties.
Ooh, I like that.
Kind of like I stop and I just like I'm having a pity party, and I just have my pity party and I regroup and I go on. So it's kind of, I don't know why that's helped me, but it's just helped to kind of like put a label on it, and I have my pity party, and then I get up and I go. And my friend Billy Simpson, who was with me at the time on the John Muir Trail, where I had a pity party, I had a couple of them in the midst of like several dirt naps along this one section that was wildly runnable. It was like 10 miles of very runnable terrain that I couldn't run for various reasons, and I had a pity party on that section, and he just kind of sat on the other side of the trail while I just did my thing, and then I got up and I was like, all right, let's go, let's go again. So
just sniffling.
It's just kind of, you have your little like, oh God, this is hard, this is really hard, and what's going on? What am I doing? This is crazy. You have lots of those, and
Can you really answer that though? Like, why are you doing this? You know what I mean? Like, why?
Where are you running from, or
what?
are you running
Right.
to?
No,
Yeah,
it's not.
yeah.
Yeah,
My brother
like,
calls me
is there
Forrest. Yeah.
something?
She calls
like,
you Forrest.
what
He calls me
is-
Forrest. Yeah, when I call his phone, it pops up as Forrest Gump. Yeah, like Tom Hanks is like the beard. Yeah.
Is it like
Yeah.
the feeling of really being alive and being out and being alone? What is it? Is it to get the fastest time and you want that for some reason?
I think it's a combination of all of that. It's a combination of being in these places and these wild places and the sunrises and the sunsets. And it's like the culmination of what we've all said that really draws you back in and really exploring and seeing new trails for me. I went to Peru this last season and did a trail in Peru that I'd wanted to run for years, and things like that. They keep kind of drawing me back to
like
to that place. Exploring the adventure of that. That's really what I get excited about.
And then every time that do you get something different every time? Like, do you feel a transformation or a shift? Every different thing that you do?
She definitely feels tired every time. Brian?
I'm just curious about this.
I think she ended just with the word there. It's just like the sense of adventure.
Yeah.
You just feel like a little kid out there.
Yeah.
And you said, what are you running from versus running towards?
Yeah.
It's like, I'm always excited to see like what's over the next peak. And it's like awesome and kind of scoping it. All right, the trail's going to go down, switchbacks up here. All right, cool. Like it's kind of just feel like a kid out there.
Yeah, you're just exploring the world.
And I think at the end of it, there is this, for me at least, there's this sense of like utter peace and the inexplainable that I think we're all kind of searching for in some ways, that like contentment and peace. And I get to, it only takes me like 100 miles to get to that place, but you get to that place. You get there.
What was your average pace?
For the John Muir Trail?
Your FKT?
I have no idea.
When you were running, you didn't even know.
See, I love
But what do you think it was?
I love that you have no idea.
You're,
I think that's awesome.
It's probably really slow, actually.
Really slow.
For like days
really
on
slow.
end? Is that what you were doing?
Very slow.
Oh, very slow.
Very slow.
Picturing you just...
Oh,
I mean,
no,
it really says a lot.
You're walking all the
about
ups.
where
you're
are.
running the downs.
It's just getting one foot in front of the other, like Louise
You're
was telling us.
pacing yourself. It's a whole other ballgame.
I haven't done the math. Yeah, okay. So it's not like you're out there giving your all 100% of the time.
Very different from running a 50K to running 220 miles.
Now, I feel like Kat might have been giving it all pretty much most of the time.
Yeah, I think it's different.
And that's the difference, right? That's the difference.
Yeah,
Can I say that my total FKT time was less than a day for a day of work for all of these guys. I'm just so impressed with these guys, and I've been out there for a really long time at the AT, and I've done some section hiking on the JMT. And I just am so impressed with all of you. And I also want to tell, before I go any further, I've been dying to say this, Darcy's time, I'm a huge Darcy fan, have been for years, before you knew who I was. And I just want to say her time was so close to the men's standing time. And I can't believe that hadn't been said yet. So,
and she wasn't even paying attention.
What? I know!
Is there a secret? Did you just not sleep, or what was the... I mean, it was such a crazy amount of time you took off of it. What was the secret?
Darcy's a really good runner.
Buzz says she's a really good runner.
Well, I have a lot of experience, but not on that kind of distance. That was a new.
Did you do something
drastically
different than the other folks?
I just,
Buzz is
I
saying
mean,
no.
I kind of knew. I took. There was 5 places where I saw my support team, and at 4 of those spots, I said, okay, I think I'm going to have a sleep station at these points, and so they had like my sleeping bag and pad out at those 4 spots. So I made it a point to stop, and I ate and I slept. But I said, do not let me sleep over an hour at any of these spots. So at every point when I slept, I would say, and I really didn't sleep except really soundly, but for one spot.
Oh, Shirley had something to say about that.
You must have been tired.
I was tired.
Yeah, Shirley was like, damn, you must have been tired. Wait, you slept how many hours and how long of a time?
I mean, it's hard to say because not all of it was very sound sleep, but probably in the vicinity of 4 hours.
Over
3 days, 8 hours, 57 minutes. Like
were
3
you
days
just
and 9
not
hours.
making sense at the end? Did you even have like a grasp on reality at the end?
Kind of. I was a little grumpy.
How about you,
I
Justin?
was kind of grumpy.
What was your mood at the end?
Oh, my mood at the end was awful. At the very end, it was nice. I smiled and was happy, and someone gave me a pizza. But and then I had 1 glass of whiskey, and then it was like, we can go to bed now. Everyone leave me alone. But yeah, the last couple of days I was really grumpy, kind of snappy. to be honest. Like if like it's almost as if I was having trouble with reality. Like someone would ask me a question, and it would take me a couple seconds to understand the question and then reply. And people would be like walking away from me. And I'd be like, come back, I've got an answer.
Crazy man.
And I'm like, I'm not making friends here, am I? They're going to be like, there's this jerk of a bicyclist up there. You want to like just stay away from that guy. So I felt like I wasn't a great ambassador of whatever kooky sport I've created. So
well, we do want to be respectful.
Anyways, I'm sorry.
Studio Boulder's time. We have so many more questions for all of you.
We need
need
to find out from Kat before we end. Her answer to this digging deep thing, because
we didn't get a digging deep
and it's
answer.
really different what you said, like from doing digging deep going fast is really different from. So can you speak to that, and then also speak to your digging deep?
So I was also talking to people, but I was also like, hey, how you doing? I'm moving really fast. Do you mind moving over? Thank you so much. Have a great day.
Really? Was it packed out there?
Not. So it was a weird time in the season, November. So the North Rim, we really didn't see anyone from like leaving Phantom Ranch. Even like down South Kaibab and out to the North Rim, we didn't really see anyone. But then coming back to the South Rim, we actually, with a ton of people, super crowded trail, as the South Kaibab always is. We got stopped by 2 mule trains, which was a happy relief. So I'm going to say that, like, going off your question, that probably the last 50 or so minutes coming out of South Kaibab was the hardest running I've ever done. I'd had less than 500 calories for the whole day just because I have a horrendous stomach. And, that really catches up to you. And what kept me digging is the canyon's unique is that when you're in, you're in. You have no getting out. And that's, I've had, in previous FKT attempts, I've been at the North Rim when the North Rim's been closed, so there's no service, puking, telling my pacer, usually Ryan, I can't do it, but you have to do it. You have another marathon with 6,000 feet of gain. So I'm going to say, to answer your question, that when I dig deep, whether it's a race or something, a project that's special to me, like the Grand Canyon, what keeps me digging deep is whatever got me to the start line. Like, I don't race often. I don't do hard efforts often, but when I do, they're always meaningful. And so whatever got me to that start line, why I'm there, whether it's Western States was an example that I just wanted to get the best out of myself. I didn't care about anything else because I was scared, honestly. But I like towed the start line being like, I don't want to give anything less than my best. But the FKT was different. I was like, I'm going to get the FKT or die, or die.
You wanted that bad boy.
Oh,
You're like, this is my third time trying this.
Been through a lot. No, that was my third
time.
But I'm going to say the first
that
and
shows.
second, it was a lot of emotional drainage. There was, in between that, there's hospital trips because of the FKT, a lot of time off work that I shouldn't have had when I was teaching. It was emotionally draining, and it's silly that it was, but it was, because it's just running. But at the same time, these projects mean so much to us, so.
And I do want to end with Peter and Buzz real quick. But while we have like a legit journalist in the trailer, I thought maybe we ought to see Nick what questions you might have. Let's see how the pros do it here.
Was there any single moment from any of these times that stands out to you? Just any one moment, any part of it? One sunset, one sunrise.
So I had Ryan run me down the South Rim, and then from the Phantom Ranch, which is 6 miles in, to the top of the North Rim, which is, it's a long way. I mean, it's like probably a little more, I think, maybe, yeah. I think like high 14s. So just a little bit more, but it's a long 14 miles. Darcy, who's previous FKT holder, by the way. That's how I first knew her name.
And she's like, I don't hate you because I have my own other FKT.
So my headlamp died about a mile out of Phantom Ranch, and it's, I don't know, 5 a.m. The sun doesn't rise for another almost 2 hours. And I'm like, well, part of me is like, well, there goes this FKT. But the other part of me, like the part of me that's like keeping going forward, was there's this full moon. And I was alone in the canyon. And this isn't even the one that I got the attempt. But the moon, it was so bright, not bright enough for me to be moving that well. But it was like the most special, isolating moments of my life. You know, you're in this massive canyon by yourself. All the water's off, so there's not backpackers at the time, you know. And that you like really, it's so cool to feel so small, and I'm sure all of these guys can relate, you know. And that was super special to me.
One moment, it's hard to pick one. But what came to my mind was actually what one of my support crews had experienced on her way in to hike in to help me. Monica Morant, who you guys know, and I think she hiked more to come in to help me out than she ever had in her whole life. She hiked through the night by herself, and she got to the spot that she was supposed to meet us by herself. And the look on her face the morning where Jeff and I had run in to see her, I don't know, there was just something like to share that with her. And so it was, for me, it was about sharing that experience with her and seeing her face like, oh my God, you have no idea what I just did. I was like so excited for her because I think she had a moment of like, it was just beautiful to watch that. So
Top that, Justin.
Almost sharing. I'm not about competition. Yeah, my moment was...
none of you are about competition.
No,
It's true.
No, not at all.
Actually, you're not. That's true.
I'm an artist.
You'd be doing... You're an artist.
Me too.
We're all artists. My moment was on Jagged Peak. I had somehow threaded through a weather window. I was on my 5th day of doing an unsupported backpack through the Wamanachi. I had 7 peaks behind me, and I had camped right below it, and the sun was going down on Jagged Peak, and it just kind of made the entire north face, south face, one of the faces on fire. And I knew like that morning I had to get up before sunrise to climb it. And it's one of the most remote and technical peaks of my entire trip. So being able to get on top of that without a blunder and just be on top was a really magical feeling. Amazingly clear skies. You could see like the 7 peaks I had done in the previous 4 days. And then that same day I did like one of the second hardest peak, which was Vestal Peak by Wham Ridge, in the same day, which is not something you do all that often. And by the time I was done with that peak, it was almost dark, and I...
Wait, not that often, just occasionally?
Occasionally you link them up, if you're feeling frisky. So I got down from Vestal Peak, and I had done the 9 peaks in 6 days that I needed to do, and all I had to do was like ride, run 10 or 17 miles, something about that, on the Colorado Trail to get back to my bike, get to Silverton and eat everything in sight and be like, sick, I did it. I guess we can keep going. Knowing I had 70 more peaks to do, but we're on our way.
And by the way, you're the tiny little thing that you had left to do that day, for most people would be like a lifetime accomplishment. Like running 10 miles would be amazing to most people.
Yeah, one of the highlights of my trip is a lot of the peaks are accessed using the Colorado Trail or the CDT. So I hung out with a lot of C-tiers or CD-tiers. So I'd cross paths with them. So they'd be going 30 miles in a couple weeks, and I'd see them doing something way out there, coming back to a backpacker and be like, oh, hey, it's you. What have you been up to? And be like, well, kind of doing this little thing. And they're like, what are you talking about? But it was great. They're a great bunch of people, and I really enjoyed hanging out with them. It's someone I could identify with, definitely.
Speaking of C-tiers.
Yeah.
C-tiers. Yeah, I guess once again I gotta just say I relate to so much of what each of you guys shared there, and being down in the canyon, I've run that before. Didn't set the FKT, but yeah, you're down in there and running mountains. Man, you're out there and feeling so small and insignificant. And there's such a big badass world out there that is truly amazing and can be just your playground. And I guess for me, I think the most important thing that I took from that was just being thankful for that time out there. I mentioned choosing that, but also like each morning we mentioned the sunrises, but kind of just like that morning prayer and whatever that might be for someone, but truly just like being thankful for like your health and happiness. And that morning when you start out, this kind of mental checklist of, oh man, how are my knees feeling? And okay, do I have the gear that I need? And just realizing that, you know what, this is actually what I do. Like I know how to do this. And being familiar with the trail, we had put some recon in years, the years leading into that, and just being like, this is familiar. Like this is my happy place, and just knowing like life's good, So I guess I'll end with that.
Peter Pakwin, I want to close with you. You are known as FKT expert, mostly because you're like the guy that had the idea of creating a website around this, I think, right?
Yeah, so I created a website 12 or 14 years ago, fastestknowntime.com, and I'm really glad that you're asking these questions and we're hearing from these folks about their experiences, because this is the reason why I created the website, not just to record the times. There were actually other people recording times in various formats and venues, but I really was interested in the stories and in what we've heard here this evening, which is how, each individual project is so personal to each person. And that's what the beauty of Fastest Known Time projects to me is that you get to do what really resonates with your soul. And I think we've really heard about that from everyone here this evening, and I'm happy about that. And that's why I started the website.
So do you feel like, this, you're kind of like looking at the culmination of a lot of work and kind of spreading the word about this and helping inspire people to kind of do their own thing? Is it kind of rewarding for you to kind of hear these guys and know that this, this is really they're taking it to heart?
It's neat to see that, things have gone in this direction. I didn't expect it when I started the website. I was just doing that because I liked these projects. I was doing these projects myself. I wanted to know what other people were doing. Partly I'm a little wistful because now I'm too old to do any of this stuff anymore. But I do remember those difficult moments as well, and I'm just not willing to step up to that level anymore. But
now,
Kelly, it's great to hear.
Kelly, you had an age group win at the Dirty 30, the hardest 30 mile, 30, what is it? I've done it. It's a 50K, the hardest 50K 30-mile race in the country, I think. I've done it. It was hard. Does this have the wheels spinning? If you were going to do an FKT, which of these folks, style or, does anything resonate with you?
Yeah, well, Darcy resonates with me because I feel like when you're just out, well, you all do, just with your passion. But I just feel like for me to just drop what time I'm going to have, even though you guys were doing you were going for a time, but to just be there and to experience being out there in adventure through the mountains for me is what I'm passionate about, and that's what gets me.
What about
level.
Jumping on your bike and doing 100 mountains?
I would if he came with me.
I'll have to talk to a couple people.
That's
all right. I'll have to talk to a couple people. It might not be okay.
Yeah, that's a question.
Which FKT route, it doesn't have to be in this, or which route inspires you the most? Oh, wow. I want to know.
For me, Skyline Traverse. That was a major accomplishment in my life. It's like a puny little warm-up, morning jog for these guys.
Probably cut the rim to rim because honestly, like, it's so beautiful out there and it doesn't take as much time as these guys. I'm not the
Get in, get out.
real, yeah. I want to get in and get out and do it kind of faster.
Well, everybody, thank you guys so much for joining us. It's been really great to have you. Make sure to check out the Alpinist podcast as well. You can see Nick Mott's piece on Devil's Tower, Bears Lodge, as well as interviews with Tommy Caldwell, Conrad Anker, David Roberts, and lots of other stuff. We really appreciate you guys tuning in. Thank you to Studio Boulder. Yay, you guys are awesome. Thank you, Studio Boulder. And thank you to our amazing and inspiring guests. You guys are amazing, and we can't wait to do more stuff with you guys because, as Nick mentioned, we really have just scratched the surface. And Peter, thanks for giving us all an excuse to get together. Awards we don't care so much about. Gold medals. Times, I mean, to be truly honest, times we don't really care that much about. It's the stories and kind of the human stories behind the outdoor adventure. But, Peter, we certainly appreciate you giving us an excuse to get everybody together. So thank you.
I didn't know it was my fault.
It is. It is your fault. See you guys. Thank you for tuning in.